Hi, Chris. Welcome to LSAT Unplugged.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. Glad to be here.
Thanks so much for joining. I'm definitely interested to get your take on admissions, given that you're working on the inside. But first, can you tell us a bit about MSU Law and what makes it unique and what goes into admissions there?
Yeah, so I'm actually an alum of MSU Law, so I can talk a lot about it in that regard. We have a variety of programs here at the law school. Some of our most well-known ones are our Indigenous Law and Policy Center, our Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation, our variety of environmental and animal law programs, business law, et cetera. So we have a variety of different things. Our Trial Practice Institute is another one that lots of our students come for those specific programs. We're right in the heart of Big Ten campus, which is really great because we do have a variety of different dual degree options for students. We actually allow them to do dual degrees with all the colleges on campus. And as there's an increased need for students to have things like a master's of public policy or a master's of business administration, that's really great for those students to be able to come and participate in those type of programs as well.
Nice. That's awesome. It sounds like there's definitely some unique things going on at the school. Are there certain types of applicants that you're particularly drawn to accepting or that you want at your school?
That's a good question. I mean, we have students from all over the country and world, so we really are a global university in every sense. So I wouldn't say there's one specific type of student we're looking for. We do conduct a holistic review of applications, so we do have a very diverse applicant pool and a diverse class coming into the law school. Typically around 50-50 split here with students from the state of Michigan. But it does vary year to year. We've had some recent years where it's been a little bit more from Michigan, and then other years where it is a majority from other states. So it is flexible in that regard. But we have like I said, all over the country from East Coast, West Coast, Southwest, good variety from Canada, etc. So it's really a unique population here.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. So one thing that stood out to me is when you said holistic review, of course, because I'm trying to figure out what exactly does that mean. Because we have the LSAT, we have the GPA, we have the soft factors, and it's hard to get a sense of how that all kind of comes together.
Definitely. So, I mean, obviously it does vary school to school, but at MSU Law, LSAT and GPA aren't the end all be all. So we definitely take a good look at those things like personal statements, letters, recommendation. Obviously, resume is important as well, but we can really look at those other components of the application beyond just the numbers to really make a decision on when students are going to be a good fit here. When it comes to things like scholarships, LSAT and GPA do play a larger role in that, but it still is a holistic review. So I get asked a lot by students whether we do some sort of mathematical formula or anything like that, and we don't. So that's nice that we do look at them independently and don't just worry about numbers.
Okay, it's good to know at least that the numbers don't determine everything, but I'm still wondering, is there still some sort of cutoff below which you wouldn't look at an application? Like, let's say if someone got a 125 or a 130 on the LSAT or had a 2.0 GPA, should they bother applying? What would the soft factors do for them there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, most of our students are within a few points on LSAT to our 25th percentile or higher, obviously. But I mean, we have had students in the 140s attend here, so it's definitely doable for those students. I don't know off the top of my head any students that we've had in the 130s, but again, every student we always recommend applying. Obviously, we provide fee waivers for students, so that also helps take a little burden so that they can try to go for that, so to speak, reach school if we are that for them. So it's always possible, but it varies independently on each of them.
That's good to know. So if someone's, let's say you took a few students in the 140s, what set them apart? Is there any particular candidate? You can anonymize details, of course, but anyone that stood out, and if so, why?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific ones I could really share. Sometimes as a student's specifically interested in a program that we offer, some of those programs I mentioned earlier, like our Trial Practice Institute, our Indigenous Law and Policy Center, et cetera. We might have a student who, other than their is in a really good position and they're very interested in that. And so, we decided that we're willing to take a risk, so to speak, on those students and allow them here. I'm trying to think of some. I know recently we had one, I think in the past couple of years, that the student had been involved with like Moot Court at the undergraduate level. They were really interested in our Trial Practice Institute. They're from Michigan, et cetera, high GPA, but LSAT was kind of lackluster. Those are the type of students that, we see those extracurriculars, those softs that could be really beneficial. And we decide, we definitely think you'd be a good fit here. We're going to make sure that you get the support services and things you need for those students. And they get those while they're here. make sure that not only they're succeeding in law school, but also have increase their chances of passing the bar exam at the end.
Well, that's really interesting. So two things stood out to me. One is the moot court. So in this case, perhaps because the extracurricular was so closely tied to law school, in this case, the EC was relevant. I often hear that ECs don't play that much of a role. So you're suggesting that in this case, it is something that you looked at?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think extracurriculars can be really beneficial. And, we have some unique programs here at the university, at the law school specifically. Another one is our Michigan Leadership Initiative that we started the last few years. So we look for students who have had some leadership on their campus in student organizations, or they've run for elected office, or they've been interning in government, et cetera, that are interested in those. So for situations like that, definitely looking at the extracurriculars can play a big role.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about this Leadership Institute and then also the Trial Practice Institute, because those both sound pretty interesting and unique.
Yeah, so the Michigan Leadership Initiative or Institute, the initiative is a program that we started 2 years ago. And so with that, students get some specialized mentorship skills. They're guaranteed a first-year externship. They participate in monthly get-togethers with leaders in government, business, academia, et cetera, across the entire state. Obviously, legal profession as well, being an important one of those. And so those students will be involved with that. Like I said, they are guaranteed an internship. It's a very selective process, but we do reviews to all of our students who apply for potential to be in part of that. Typically, those students have some sort of connection to the state already, whether they're from here and went somewhere else for college and are wanting to come back, or they've been here the entire time. Widely varies, but that is something that we really want to build off of those leadership skills that students are demonstrating during their academics, especially in undergrad, to help the community, especially here in Michigan. When it comes to Trial Practice Institute, that's definitely different. That's a more curricular program that we have here. So it's the Jeffrey Feiger Trial Practice Institute, and that's a set curriculum in the second and third year of law school. Students apply for that going into their second year of law school. So in the spring of their 1L year, it's a competitive test, and with that, they're taking roughly 3 to 5 credit hours a semester that they then are focusing on actual trial advocacy skills. So there's things like theatrical skills for lawyers, how to cross-examine witnesses, how to use expert testimony, et cetera, in addition to like criminal procedure, a couple other courses that they get to take as part of that. So that's actually a set curriculum. It's one of the few programs we have that has a set curriculum here at the law school.
Well, that's good to hear about, because so many future law students, they imagine themselves doing trial law, they imagine all the drama and everything, but I gather that in reality, only a small percentage of lawyers actually do that. If you had to ballpark it, what percentage of actual practicing lawyers do trial work?
It's a good question. When I was at my firm, I never did trial work, but I know overall of legal cases, so to speak, there's roughly only 2% that ended up going to trial out of all cases. So it's a very small number. It really depends on what type of firm you're going to as well. I would tend to lean towards those that are going to mid-sized firms or small firms are going to be in the court a lot more, because they are going to be representing clients. When you're going to larger firms, you might not necessarily be dealing with that, especially as an associate. But I haven't lived a big law firm life myself. So I don't know off the top of my head what number I would say. I would say maybe 20 to 30% of attorneys go into the courtroom.
Maybe. But it's interesting though, because it means that you're not necessarily likely to go into trial law or practice trials, but then with this institute, you could potentially gain the skills that would increase the likelihood that you do end up being one of those attorneys who's in the courtroom, if that's what you want to do.
Absolutely. And the majority of our students who go into that, into the TPI, as we call it, end up going into jobs that they are advocating in the courtroom, whether they're criminal defense, the prosecutor, the attorney general's office, or going into private practice and dealing with the litigation side of things. So many of my own classmates are doing that, and that's what they continue to do, and they love to do it. So if you're into litigation, it's definitely good to look for programs like that, because you are going to get those real world skills. It also helps for getting those internships that lead to those jobs that will get you that litigation experience.
That's pretty cool. And then to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier with the moot court, I would imagine that the moot court's also, of course, a lighter way to potentially gain some of those skills as well. So maybe some students who are still in undergrad could seek out that sort of activity or start one.
Yeah, definitely. And, even in law school, you have a variety of opportunities when it comes to doing moot court or other, groups like that. So we have a lot of teams, and so many of our students will do both like Trial Practice Institute and do a moot court team here. or other competition team here at the law school, but starting in undergrad could be really beneficial for that.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the parts of the application. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the personal statement, what advice you give applicants, what common mistakes you see.
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost in the personal statement, the biggest mistake I always see is bad punctuation or grammar. So that's the first thing I always mention to students is always make sure you're proofreading it and always have others proofread it. We get a situation where some students might either edit it so much that they lose their voice or edit it so much that they lose their voice, so to speak. And so having them look over, typically we always recommend having one person look over the grammatical side and then have another person look over it who knows you pretty well to see if they hear your voice in that. For me, hearing person's voice through that personal statement is really important. That writing style is important. Although fundamentally in law school, we rewrite how you're going to write, so to speak. But overall, I would say punctuation and grammar is vital. It shows how much time you're putting into it. I read people posting online, and I miss one small grammatical error, and they start to freak out and think it's end all be all. That's not going to be a big deal, but continuous mispunctuation, miscapitalization, just fundamentals will get noticed. So that would be the first, but I think the most important thing, like I kind of talked a little bit about, is really letting that voice shine through. The rest of the application is very sterile, and so we don't get to know you. It provides a 2 to 3 page, viewport that we can learn who you are, what makes you tick, what you think about law, those type of things. And so that can be really beneficial. So you don't want to lose yourself in that as you go through your process of writing it.
Thanks for that. So of course, like the mistakes in terms of grammar, punctuation, those you can get solved pretty easily. You could have a friend look it over or even hire an editor just to do a surface level check on that. But then the question of the voice, I think that's a tougher question in a way, because who's to say what your authentic voice is? And then you can also think, well, you want to present the best possible version of yourself. So it's always like a tricky line to walk. I'm wondering, also being too formal or too personal or both maybe, but what's an example, maybe if you can think of one, of a student's essay that was not their true voice and was too maybe contrived or artificial? And then what's an example that comes to mind of one that did it right?
Oh, that's a great question. I've had, especially talking more recently about, students talking about their heritage of being immigrants, whether they're first generation American or their grandparents or parents being immigrants, and then, what the impact that's had on them growing up. And so that's been a real focus, especially for students who want to go into immigration law or human rights, etc. So that can be it's really genuine. And you can tell when they're talking about the experience that they've had, the relationship they've had with those individuals who, sacrifice so much time. I had a student who I read who was talking about their grandparents coming over from Mexico, undocumented, years ago, and the sacrifices that they lived, basically living in squalor for years and years so that they could provide for their parents, who's then been able to really give them an opportunity that their grandparents never thought would have been able to happen and be able to come to law school. And so, just genuinely talking about those experiences, it really shines through. I would say talking about those that are really, you can tell is kind of fake to an extent. I don't want to say they're fake, but disingenuous a little bit, is when students, especially ones that have had generational of attorneys, so their parents have been attorneys, their grandparents have been attorneys, and they talk about basically that's why they want to go to law school, so they can continue that. But you can really tell sometimes that they're only doing that because that's the expectation of their family, not because they really are wanting to come to law school or that's their true passion. And so sometimes you can see that, and that's not to say every generational student is that way. It's not, but occasionally we'll see one or two that are like that. And you're like, kind of just like, well, otherwise they're okay, but it's like you notate that in their application. So
Nice. So one thing that's kind of shining through for me in both of these examples is some sort of demonstrated interest in the law, like actively, and or some sort of personal experience as well. So I'm thinking that applicants would want to have at least one of those things. And if they happen to have a personal connection, then maybe it's good to talk about that as well.
Yeah, that's definitely, I would say, and most students either talk about why they want to go into law, or they talk about some personal experience that's not related to the law, but that has driven them to want to go into law.
Yeah. So let's say someone is like a senior in college, or maybe they've been in the workforce a couple of years. And maybe they haven't done anything to demonstrate interest in the law that they could put on a resume.
Mhm.
What might they look to do at that point if they're already out of school specifically to demonstrate interest in the law? What are some examples you've seen?
Are we talking just for the personal statement?
For the personal statement, but also it could be in the resume too, of course.
Yeah, so I would say for the personal statement, it really is just telling a story. It doesn't have to connect to the law. Some of the best ones you read don't talk about the law at all. They just talk about, this personal experience that they've had, and that's why they want to go to law. For the resume, it's not necessary to have any experience in the law. I actually myself didn't have any experience in the law prior to coming. And so, we do get a lot of students who choose to go and do some sort of internship or externship during undergrad, or work as a legal assistant after graduation, or paralegal. That's another one we see a lot of. But by no means are students expected to have that experience. We have I know we've had one student who started in the past couple of years who worked in business and finance for a long time, never connected with the law, so to speak, but they're interested in banking and business law. And so that's what they want to come into. So wide variety of experience, and that's actually kind of what's great about being unique in the experiences you can lay out. And some schools do offer different ways to frame it too. Some schools offer diversity statements as an option, or other sorts of essays that they can then write about an interest in the law, or conversely, what experience has led them to the law.
Okay, so let's get into that a little bit, the diversity statement. What are some examples you've seen that work, some that don't? I'm particularly interested in students who maybe don't come from a traditionally underrepresented group, and they're not sure how they might highlight diversity from their background, or even if they should try to.
Yeah, so I mean, when we say diversity, we think of the traditional notions of age, gender, ethnicity, which are really important. So that's not to discount them. But when we look at a diversity statement as an option here at the law school, we look at it as a widespread idea and concept of diversity. So I've actually read some diversity statements talking about what it's like to be a conservative white male from a small town in academia. And some of them are really interesting. And so there's all different ways you can talk about that, not just coming from a traditionally underrepresented minority population. So those life experiences, work experience. We do have some non-traditional students who have been in the workforce for 20 years and decided they want to go into law for, reasons X, Y, and Z. And they talk about the experience that they've had in their professional life and what diversity that'll bring to the discussion in the classroom. And I think many others will agree, law school is all about not only what you're going to get out of it, what you're going to bring to it. And because of that, the diversity statement really lets you shine on what you're going to bring to the classroom as part of those discussions.
Right. It sounds like it's a great opportunity to provide some additional context and another side of yourself that maybe you didn't have coming through before.
Definitely. And, it's another one of those writing samples that always can be beneficial to continue to show that voice and, your writing abilities.
Yeah, definitely. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about school selection. I know that obviously you promote your school, you go out and tell people about it, but what are some factors you encourage applicants to think about in terms of size, location, programs?
Yeah, I mean, so a variety of different things, and unfortunately or fortunately, everybody's going to tell you something different. I mean, LSAT has a really good tool on their website, so that's always a good starting point. And so you can actually enter in your GPA and your LSAT score, and it's going to give you schools that where you would fit in the range for schools. You can even do it by geographic location. So that's a great starting point just to get an idea of what exists, because if I would have realized all the law schools that there are out there now that I know now in this position, when I was applying to law school, I probably would have applied to some other ones as well, and not applied to some of the ones I did. Especially if you're first generation law student or first generation undergrad student, you really don't have that context on what you're doing if you don't have a good pre-law advisor that can help you guide that way a little bit. So, so I'd start with that tool. Other things is really just thinking about what you're interested in for an actual degree perspective. So obviously the JD, but if you're interested in environmental law, if you're interested in business law, those are the type of things. See what programs are out there that are specifically tailored for that. So for like us with our Indigenous Law and Policy Center, we're one of the few in the country that have that opportunity that provide a certificate for it. And so many students are interested in that type of thing. And so they're going to pursue that as part of coming here. And that's why they looked at us to begin with. I'm trying to think of other things. You hear a lot about geographic reach. So location to where you're wanting to practice, it can play an impact. So some law schools are very much regional in nature, and they have a very strong alumni base. And so students who are in those areas, those regional law schools can really provide a benefit for them. Many times, maybe a cheaper cost as well than going to some of the larger law schools in the country. But you're still going to be able to get those job prospects in that region that you're wanting. Other law schools are national, so to speak, with alumni all over the country. And so looking for alumni in those areas could be really beneficial. So, reaching out to the admissions office at the school, or just, researching on our website can give you context on that. Or state bars, for example, will have context when it comes to what the bar passage rates are from certain schools, depending on level. And that does vary widely state by state on what they publicly release, for better or for worse. But some states you can see that's like California, for example. I think if more than 11 students take the bar in that state or in California from that school, then they'll go ahead and publish the passage rate for that state or for that school in the state, even if they're out of state schools, whereas in Michigan, they only list the Michigan schools and then other. So it can vary in that regard. So thinking about those type of things and where you're wanting to end up geographically can be beneficial, because while a lot of students are shooting for those big, top 14 or top 30 law schools, some of the regional schools can really be beneficial when it comes to job market for where you're going.
That's really valuable. Thanks for that rundown, Chris. Could you share a little bit more about the Indigenous program, because that sounds pretty unique, and I'm sure it would interest a lot of people.
Yeah, so our Indigenous Law and Policy Center is one of the handful of certificate programs here in the entire country. And so we have students from a variety of Indigenous tribes from all over the country come for that. We also have students who are non-Indigenous but are interested in those topics come as part of that. And so with that, they have a variety of courses they take during their second and third year. Impact Indigenous law, whether it's things on the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA as it's called. We'll have students take classes like natural resource law, because that has such a large impact on tribal properties and land. We have ones on water rights, I think is another one. Gaming law, which is a big thing for lots of tribes, because they do choose to have gaming facilities on their reservations, except and other tribal lands. So a variety of different courses we have is that. So we have lots of different students. In addition to the curriculum side of things, we also have our Indian Law Clinic. So they're actually dealing with ICWA all the time across the country. And so there's a really unique opportunity to deal with child welfare cases. And then it also, in general too, it also provides students a support structure. So those students typically meet once a month, make sure that they're connecting with the resources they need and getting the support on campus to be able to succeed. And they work with our I want to say Indian and Native American Law Students Association, but I probably messed up the name. And so they are working in conjunction with that as well, to host events and things like that with alums and other individuals involved with that field of law coming to campus.
Oh, that's really cool. And I can imagine that being located in the state of Michigan, there might be some opportunities to get involved with the community surrounding as well. Is there anything like that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a variety of different tribal lands here in Michigan, and including the university being on traditional native land. And so that's an important component of our identity here at the law school. And we have a variety of faculty members who are of Indigenous roots and backgrounds. So that's really nice. And so our alums both stay here in Michigan and go all over the country to advocate for different tribal interests and native issues across the entire country, whether it's in Washington, D.C., working for federal government and nonprofits, working in other states in their various administrative divisions, and a variety of capacities here in Michigan, whether it's working as tribal judges, working for the state government, a variety of other opportunities too.
That's really cool. So it sounds like your school is great for both those in Michigan, but also those who want to practice outside. There's opportunities for both.
Absolutely. So our top 3 spots for alums over the past decade are here in Michigan, being Southeast Michigan, Grand Rapids, and here in Lansing. But outside of that, Chicago is our number 1. I joke that it's East Lansing West, because both from law school and undergrad, we have so many Spartans there. And then places like Denver, all over California, Texas, Florida, Miami's another big area. So we really have alums go all over the country. We actually have alums practicing all 50 states and 32 countries.
Wow. Well, this has been super informative and extremely useful, Chris. What's the best way for applicants to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the school or ask questions?
Yeah, so a variety of ways to get involved with us. You can just send us an email. My email address is chljackson@law.msu.edu. So send me an email. I'm always happy to respond. I'm always available to chat. They can also call our direct line here in our office. It's 517-432-0222. And they can talk to us anytime or set up a consultation with one of our admissions coordinators, including myself.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Any final words you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to reach out. The admissions offices are there to talk. They're there to help you out, whether it's with just general questions about the application process for them or just general application, or just about specific programs. They're there. They love to chat. That's their job. So don't be afraid to reach out. We get lots of students who are concerned, like they're bothering us or, don't know what to ask and things like that. We're here to help. So if you get a chance to connect with them, whether it's us or another admissions office, it really can help benefit your application, I think.
Well, it sounds like you're offering a great resource and making yourself very available. So I definitely encourage folks to reach out and ask any questions they have. Thanks again for doing this, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity.